The internals at the early age, not so easy. As we try to keep them aware of Allah, relate things back to Allah, we're trying to develop a consciousness within them which links that external to the internal. But ultimately, we must understand that the Islam which is going to take us to the Akhirah, which will aid us in utilizing every minute of our day, is the one based on submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that submission, I'm sure you will agree with me, cannot be inherited. You cannot inherit from your parents submission. That is a spiritual act which each and every one of us has to do himself or herself. Nobody can do it for us. Each and every one of us has to decide, if we haven't already decided, has to decide right now, before our last breath comes. We have to decide to accept Allah in our lives, that we truly submit to Allah. That decision we must make, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said there are people who will do the deeds of the people of paradise as it appears to people. Externally, they're fasting, praying, zakah, hajj, all the different things. But he said, they will be of the people of hell. Externally, they will appear to be the people of paradise. They're doing the acts. Islam, they're doing it. But Prophet ﷺ said, they will be of the people of hell. Because internally, they had not internalized Islam. It was an external facade. So this priority, what we're talking about, is to practice Islam in its purity. That requires, of course, seeking knowledge. This is to achieve that priority, we must have knowledge of what Islam is, what true Islam is, so we'll be able to distinguish between cultural practices and what in fact is true Islam. Secondly, having identified the prerequisites of Islam, now Islam has many parts to it. There are many issues in Islam. It's huge. It's an ocean. It covers every second of our day. Every act that we can do. Every thought that we can make. It's huge. It's vast. So where do you start? Obviously, we have to start with the 5 pillars of Islam. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said those. Here's Tawheed that brother spoke about. Tawheed, that has to be in place. Clear, true Tawheed. We need to know what Tawheed is. Having known properly what Tawheed is, because some people, why I'm saying this just to give a little bit of clarity here, Tawheed, which means maintaining Allah's unity in everything that we do, we say, and we think with regards to Allah. Allah's unity is manifest in every aspect of our lives. This is Tawheed. That's true Tawheed. However, you have some people who say Tawheed means believing that only Allah exists. There's only one existence, Allah. Everything else is an illusion. That sounds like oneness, but in fact, it is a false belief. It is the essence of idolatry. To believe that only Allah exists, that this creation is an illusion, it's not real, everything is Allah, means you are Allah, I am Allah, he is Allah, she is Allah. That's the reality. Then, what is the conclusion? You don't need to pray to Allah outside yourself. As Ibn Arabi says, you can pray to yourself. Because everything is Allah. So why pray external? Internal is much closer. So we have to be clear, what is Tawheed? It's a term, but we need to know, in fact, what it is and what it isn't. So, following Tawheed, we have Salah. And we have to ask ourselves, how many people this morning prayed Salatul Fajr? People who live near the masjid prayed it in the masjids. We see the masjids full on Jummah. We see the masjids full in Ramadan coming up. But when you go to most masjids for Salatul Fajr, you only see a handful. What does that mean? When the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that Salatul Fajr is most difficult on hypocrites, people who pretend to be Muslims. Difficult. That's why spies, it's difficult for non-Muslims to function as spies in the midst of Muslims. They can put on the outer garb, grow a beard, everything else, but Fajr, difficult. Very difficult. And they can be exposed easily. If the community is practicing, because we won't see them there for Fajr. Maybe they'll come one time, but consistently, no. But then we have to ask ourselves, where are we? Are we like those spies unable to come for Fajr, except occasionally? The hypocrites? Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul? So, we have to set our priorities and deal with them. What the Prophet ﷺ identified as priorities, we deal with them and do them the way he told us to do them. Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli, pray as you saw me pray. Khudhu anni manasikakum, take your rites of Hajj from me, etc. So we need to do Islam as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did Islam. And we have to, after establishing those priorities of the pillars, because that's where the Prophet ﷺ started, then we apply the rest of the teachings of Islam in our lives. We have to fulfill all of our various obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this way, if we are systematically dealing with what is required of us, as the Prophet ﷺ had said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٍ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ, each and every one of you is a shepherd responsible for his flock. Then we are focusing on our responsibilities. If we think about our responsibilities, we will have no time to spare. We will know that our responsibilities are more than the time we have to do them. So we cannot afford to waste time. There are no holidays from Islam. We have holidays from work, but no holiday from Islam. We have to be on the job, as they say, 24/7. That's the bottom line. So, if we're able to put those in place, then the time frame that we have, which are the few days about which Al-Hasan al-Basri spoke, inshallah, when any of them goes, we will not lose. Every day which goes will be days added to our scale of good deeds. We have to be clear. We have a time frame, these few days which Allah has allotted us. So if we are to be successful in achieving the goals, then we must deal with our Islam, what is required of us, systematically. We need to be clear on what it is and what it isn't. We need to be focused on what is required of us and our responsibilities. We need to fulfill all of the duties that have been put on us. And among those duties in these times, as a closing thought, is the importance of educating our families. Educating them Islamically, first and foremost. And this is one of the areas that the Muslim community here has fumbled, stumbled, and failed. Because we haven't taken this responsibility of conveying Islam to our children properly. It is the right of each and every Muslim child that they be educated in Islamic institutions of education. It is haram, and I know this is a hard word, it is haram to put our children in government schools. It is primarily haram. No scholar will say halal. No true scholar of Islam will say it is halal for you to do this. It is an exception where you have no other choice, you're forced, etc. Truly, you had no choice. You were not able to set up alternatives that it would be permissible for you as a permissible part of the haram. For you, exception. Otherwise, it is the right of our children to be in Islamic institutions. To put our children for the majority of each day of the year in the hands of non-Muslims, to be educated, to be inundated with their culture, their secular, idolatrous culture, is primarily haram, because what we are committing here is what we call spiritual suicide. That's what we're doing. And of course some parents will argue, but the Islamic schools are inferior academically. The available Islamic schools are inferior academically. Well, I ask you, if you have the choice between an inferior academic school, but Islamic nonetheless, that your child will come through graduating knowing Allah, knowing their relationship, knowing what Islam is, who they are, but they're weak academically. If that is your choice, between that and putting them in the government schools, where they will come through strong academically, or private schools, will they come through strong academically, but spiritually, Islamically, they have been wiped out. Their Islam is confused, if there is any left. This is your choice. You say, but I'm concerned about my child's future. What future? Akhirah or dunya? Because in the case of such a choice, we only have one choice: to put them in that Islamic school with inferior academics. Because when the child graduates with inferior academics, we can hire a tutor, work out somewhere or another to get something to help them improve their academics. But when they come through the government schools and they are wiped out, confused Islamically, and they're now teenagers, they're grown, you're going to try to teach them Islam and make up and correct? It's a failure. You're not going to be able to. You've lost the opportunity. That time is gone. This is one of the biggest challenges with regards to maximizing the time that Allah has given us. The time that that child, our children, are with us. To maximize their understanding, their appreciation of Islam, so they can grow up Muslims, not grow up confused, and maybe later on in their 20s and so, they may come across a good Muslim or whatever, and it helps them, it wakes them up, and they come back to Islam. But much of their youth, they were outside of Islam. How many does it happen to? For each of the youth that are amongst us today, ask them about their classmates. We can point and say, yes, there are more youth in the masjid today than there were 10 years ago. More. There's an awareness. But our numbers are greater. In general, the population of Muslims has increased through immigration, etc. Ask, the better way to judge what is happening here is to ask that young man, how many of his classmates are where he is today? And you will find consistently throughout the country that 80%, 90% of his classmates are lost. And that sin, because there is a sin that is a product of a sin of putting our children to be educated by atheists, secularists, Christians, others who will promote their own culture and their own ideals. That is a sin which the whole community bears. And for those who say, well, these Islamic schools are too expensive. Well, how much money are we spending? Remember, we'll be asked on the Day of Judgment about our wealth, how we earned it, and how we spent it. If we go back into our lives and look at the money that we waste for a variety of things, and we say, let's sacrifice those things and put our children in the Islamic school, for many of us it is still possible. And for those of us who can't, what do? You homeschool. There is homeschooling. Even amongst the Westerners, many of them have taken their children out of school. So you have a whole homeschooling network available on the internet. People teaching their children at home in the primary grades to give them a good moral foundation. And Muslims, there's a Muslim homeschoolers on the net. You can contact them. And they have been working over the years, developing very good programs, etc., for education at home. And then there is establishing more schools. Even the schools we have, if they were filled, and many of the schools, they have empty spaces. They're not full. Even if they were filled, it wouldn't be enough to deal with our population. So we need many more schools. This is the challenge. We need to make the most of our time. Our time here, the time that our children are in our care, we will be asked. We have to answer about how we spent our time and how we help them spend their time. What have we actually done? What have we sacrificed? Brothers and sisters, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to awaken from our sleep and to submit ourselves truly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to leave this masjid today with our faith renewed, coming back to true Islam and fulfilling our responsibilities, not only to ourselves, but to our families. To raise a generation that will know Islam. And the exception will be those that went astray, not the norm. So that Islam can really be established in this land and be conveyed to the people of this land. I ask Allah to bless our gathering and to guide us to what is good and to forgive us our deficiencies, our weaknesses, our sins of the past, and to help us to turn over a new leaf. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.